Now, people in the north of the country are forking a higher proportion of their wages out on council tax than people who live in London.
This has prompted a call from the Taxpayers Alliance to issue a 12-month council freeze to help ease the burden of the cost of living crisis.
But what would happen to our local services like schools, rubbish and recycling collections if this went ahead?
Well, let's speak to the media campaign manager of the Taxpayers Alliance, Conor Holohan. And Conor, thank you for joining us this morning. I suppose the big question is, isn't it the case that council tax is lower in places like Westminster because incomes are higher in places like Westminster? And so proportionally, these councils find it easier to get more with lower rates?
Well, it's also pegged to property prices, but that's no excuse for the disparity. That's no reason to accept that people who haven't got the broadest shoulders are having to stump up most of the burden. We look at West Devon, where we have some of the lowest wages in the country, and your average earner paying your average amount of council tax is paying 10% in the pound. And, that can't be acceptable during a cost of living crisis when people are really struggling to make ends meet. We need to see something done about this. We need to see councils freezing council tax and finding savings.
Is freezing council tax the way to go with this, or does it not just need to be a rebalancing of the books to keep it proportionate to income or keep it proportionate to the cost of a property, the value of a property? Would that not make more sense than just freezing it across the board?
Well, the problem is what's driving these massive burdens is out of control spending or failure to think of residents when budgets are being set. I would say that a council like West Devon, where residents are paying 10% in the pound on their council tax, they have a responsibility to deliver good value. I mean, you look in West Devon, the chief executive is earning over £100,000. He's not paying 10% of his wages on council tax. And there's a much better deal for people in London who have higher property prices. Relative to property prices, some in Westminster, people are paying only 0.1% on council tax. And when it's linked to wages, it's only 2%. So there's a huge disparity here, and it's unsustainable.
Funding councils in entirely the wrong way. So many councils are reliant on not just council tax, but also on grants from central government to provide services. Wouldn't it be better if councils could keep sort of value uplift of developing property, for example, on their land?
It's important that this is looked at and measures are taken to ease the pressure on residents, because they're the ones who are being battered by this. They're the ones who are facing the hardship because of it. And since council tax was introduced back in 1993, we've seen council tax burden relative to salary more than double. We've seen council tax nationally increase by nearly 80% in real terms. So there does need to be this does need to be addressed, because people are being pummeled by their council tax.
OK, so you're suggesting this 12-month council tax freeze. What will that actually mean, though, for people's local services? What would it mean for schools? What would it mean for rubbish and recycling collections if this actually went ahead?
Well, it's obviously important that the key services are protected. I think what people are frustrated about, particularly when they're paying high amounts of council tax, is that their council are doing things which aren't key services. They're paying massive salaries to town hall bosses, or they're engaging in property development, or maybe in some cases like South Cambridgeshire, they're experimenting with 4-day weeks and things like that. So what it should look like is councils finding efficiencies and savings and passing those savings on to taxpayers while protecting the key services.
It is interesting, of course, because we have just been speaking to our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. Prices still going up, inflation at 6.8%. That means that any sort of freeze would mean a real terms cut in the amount being spent in real terms.
Well, like I said, since council tax has been introduced, when you adjust for inflation, council tax has increased by nearly 80%. So it's not necessarily the case that it's going to be always on the way up in real terms. These things need to be, you adjust for inflation, but these things are going up over and above inflation, and that burden is falling on hard-pressed people who are having to deal with these increases in prices and the high level of energy bills we've seen over the last 12 months.
OK, Conor Holohan, really good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time.